We are very pleased to have here Dr. Wen Wen, who is Associate Professor in Higher Education at Tsinghua's University's Institute of Education, and also is Vice Director of the Tsinghua University Center for Asian Studies. And she is currently at Harvard, but will join the Center for International Higher Education in the fall as a visiting professor for 3 months, and we are looking very much forward to her presence at the center. We hope on site and not online, but we still don't know that, as still all universities in the United States and also more globally are still waiting for what will happen in the fall. And yesterday, we, as faculty, had a meeting with the provost and the president of the university, and they still think that by the end of June, they make a decision what will happen in the fall semester, but they still want to go as much as possible on site. So we hope to have Dr. Wen Wen then also with us in live. The research interests of Dr. Wen Wen are in higher education policy, comparative and international higher education, internationalization of higher education, and college student development and assessment. And she has done already a large record of research and leadership and development in the field of higher education, leading many projects, have done over 50 publications, and was successful in a lot of research funding for her work. So she is really an expert, and we look very much forward to her talk, and then we hope time to have some Q&A. So welcome, Dr. Wen Wen, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you, Hans. Thank you for the introduction, and I think I sound much better than I am really are from your mouth. So thank you very much for the introduction. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I'm trying to, yeah, here you are. Yeah, is it working?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, you can see it, right? Okay, good. Wow. Okay, good afternoon from Boston, and hello to colleagues and friends from the Center for International Higher Education and from institutes around the world. I am deeply grateful to have the opportunity to discuss China's higher education with you in the next 40 minutes. It will be a very valuable experience for me to exchange with you, to learn more about higher education in different parts of the world and to develop my own thoughts. The Center for International Higher Education is renowned for its cutting-edge research and global coverage in higher education studies. So many of the big names we have quoted a lot and frequently actually are from here. So yeah, it's my great honor to give a talk today. So I will first introduce myself quickly. Okay, Hans has already introduced me. Well, a little bit, some more words about my institute. My institute is among one of the oldest institutes conducting higher education studies in China. Our history can be traced back to 1920s when Tsinghua University established the Department of Educational Psychology. In my institute, we have about 120 graduate students and 100 PhD students and more than 100 EDD students. So I taught the course Foundations of Higher Education, and my research interests mainly focuses on higher education internationalization, college student development, and higher education policy. Okay, so today I will be sharing with you my thoughts of what the distinctiveness is about China's higher education and what factors have been shaping the distinctiveness. So I will start by showing some of the pictures of my university. so which will set a foundation of context of today's talk about Chinese higher education. So if you visited most of the old universities in China, when I say old, I mean those universities were built in the late 19th century or early 20th century. So you will see two portraits of those universities. For example, for Tsinghua University. So for this slide, I'm showing you the historical part of the campus. So here, oh, can you see my mouse? Okay, so you would say that in the middle of the, okay, I will just make it big. So here, so in the middle of the slide, this picture is the inside outlook of the library, of the old library, and here is the gymnasium, and here is the old academic building, and this here is the observatory, and this is the most famous building, which is the theater. So, well, I believe these pictures, these photos will remind you of those American universities, like the Virginia University and some other, American universities. Tsinghua, because Tsinghua was established in 1911, and it began as a preparatory school in the arts and the sciences for students to study in the U.S. And it was funded with Boxer indemnity funds remitted from the U.S. Well, if I show you the other part, the modern part of the campus, so you would see that, wow, it's very different. It's like another world. So this is the medical school, and this picture is the new law school, and this is the new gymnasium, and this is the new library for social sciences and humanities. And this picture is very interesting. This is the Museum of Arts, which is very innovative because Tsinghua is renowned for its engineering subjects in the world. So you cannot believe that in this engineering, I mean, which is famous for its engineering subjects, there is a Museum of Arts. So today, Tsinghua has reestablished itself as a comprehensive university. So the simple point I want to make here by showing you the two parts of Tsinghua University is that the intellectual and also the architectural origins of every Chinese university today were international in origin. So and it is very significant to think about the relationship between taking in or importing and also giving or going out at this particular moment of China's higher education. Okay, let's now come to today's topic. So the question addressed in this lecture, in this talk, is that, is there a Chinese idea of university? This question has different versions. Such as is there a China model of university, or whether China is the center of periphery, or whether China can move from the periphery to the center. So there are a few scholars have written some papers about this topic, but it is still a controversial topic because this question itself has many connotations. So if the question is about whether China has developed a globally influential model of higher education, for example, like German von Humboldt or the US Research University, the answer would be no. Yeah, definitely no, and not yet. But if the question is about what is distinctive about Chinese university, what are its main characteristics, how is it different from the European, American universities? For me, it will make more sense. and the question will be caught up in the larger question of the potential impacts of Chinese forms of economy, society, governance. Again, the story is only just the beginning as China goes out in this period. So I will quickly, go through the 4 models. Because I think everybody doing higher education studies will be very familiar with these 4 models. So what I'm going to say here is that these 4 models of a higher education, like Newman's idea of university, von Humboldt's research university, Clark Kerr's multiversity, and this and the very recent triple helix. All these 4 models of the university share common cultural roots. So since the medieval European universities was founded in the fault line between church and the state, and later in the modern era, higher education and research became annexed to nation-building projects across the world. So arguably, the modern European and American university is less separated from the state than its older predecessors. And both government and university managers have more hooks into academic work. So to use Laws's words, he wrote a famous book about named Between Citizens and the State, the Politics of American Higher Education in the 20th Century. He used the word that American universities are playing a role as a quasi-state, acting as an agent between the state and citizens. But the relationships are still broadly in continuity with those established in the early European universities. However, from the very beginning, it was different. It was very different in China. The state developed as a comprehensive state, able to intervene in any parts of society in order to secure order and prosperity. Although the central state of China delegated the normal function of the society and economy to provinces and villages. So because there was no division of powers equivalent to that involved in the West, and there was limited potential for Western style civil society sitting between the family and the state in China. So the root of China's higher education is very, very different. And it was also a different intellectual world in China to the West. In the West, following Plato, theoretical knowledge was conceived of as separated from and often superior to practical knowledge. The task of inquiry was to discover truth. But in Confucian thought, knowledge was always linked to the empirical world and served practical ends. So the task of inquiry in China was to find ways of meeting the needs of state or society. But in the West, knowledge was subdivided into different disciplines for the purpose of both teaching and scholarship. But in China, some scholars emphasizes the synthesis between different kinds of knowledge. So in sum, the governance tradition was different, and also the intellectual, the knowledge tradition is also different between the West and China. So once the comparative context is established, so we can have a quick look of the development of China's higher education. And then we will come back to discuss, why and what factors have shaped or are attributed to the development or success of China's higher education. Well, so as one of the biggest higher education system in the world, Chinese universities are accommodating nearly 40 million students. and the gross enrollment rate of higher education is approximately 48%. And alongside expansion in student enrollment, there has also been equally rapid growth in the stock of published knowledge. China emerges as the top contributor to global science. So you would see from this figure, this slide, that yes, this bar, the shadowed bar represents the publication, the English publication of Chinese authors, while this this shadowed shape in the background represents the publication of the United States. So if all the papers with at least one Chinese address or name are included, without weighting on the basis of shares, China was associated almost 35% of global science in the year 2016. So there's another thing many research overlooked, is that China has also a vast domestic national science system. Okay, if we look at this slide, so we would see that, you know, so in the table on the left, we would see that the first column is the paper published in Chinese, and the second volume are the papers published in English by Chinese authors. So you would say that for physics, material science, biology, chemistry, management, mathematics, there are far more articles published in Chinese than in English publication. But there are also some subjects. Like psychology, computer science, engineering, geoscience, medicine, and astronomy. So for these subjects, the Chinese papers are also much more than the English papers. So if we look at this table on the right, we also calculated the overlap rate between the high yield authors of Chinese journals included in this. This is a data set, and we make a comparison of the overlap. Of the high yield authors of Chinese journals and also the high yield authors of English journals. So we would say that in life science and biomedicine, the overlap rate is 15%. So what I want to say here is that, sorry, am I sharing this picture? Yeah. So when we're talking about, you know, China's involvement in the global science, we have to also pay attention to that. There's also a vast and huge domestic science system. So that makes the tension between the indigenization of knowledge and also the global impact of knowledge more. The tension is more intense in China than in other countries. Yeah, and also if we use the measure of the top 5% published scientific papers in English journals, China has achieved outstanding performance in STEM disciplines. So among the top 10 universities, which has the best performance in physical sciences and engineering, 7 of them are Chinese universities. 4 of them are Chinese universities, and 4 of them are American universities. well, for the top 10 universities in maths and complex computing, 7 of them are Chinese universities. And also, China has gained great success in promoting its top research universities to a world-class level. So compared to 14 years ago, in 2006, there are more Chinese universities ranked in the top 50, top 100, and top 200 in the world-class university league table. And the only competitor from Asia in terms of the world-class university rankings is Japan. And meanwhile, China has become one of the biggest destination of international students. So up to 2018, the total number of inbound international students has grown to almost 500,000. So only after the United States and on par with the UK. Well, so this brings us back to the question we asked in the very beginning. So what is different about higher education in China that enabled this development, to happen? There are many literature talking about this, and different scholars view this from different perspectives. For example, there are economical factor and also governance, and some people think culture is also a very important factor to be attributed to the success of Chinese higher education. So what I'm going to argue here is that the success of Chinese higher education is mainly attributed to its distinctive governance. And it is meaningless to separate the governance of higher education, including the governance of academic conduct from an account of its development and the success. China's higher education system is deeply embedded in its political system. So I will analyze this from 3 layers or 3 levels. So number 1 is mission. So the mission, when I say mission, I mainly refer to what is and how the overarching mission is designed in China for Chinese universities. And the second level is governance. It's how higher education institutions are governed externally and internally. And the third level is the operational level. So how knowledge is produced and transmitted, because knowledge is the most important. It's the core element for higher education study, for higher education for universities. And I highlight the first layer and the second layer in red, because these two, China very strong at these 2 aspects. I mean, mission and also governance. But I highlight the third layer, operational level, in blue. That is probably the weakest part for Chinese higher education universities. So okay, if we look at mission, well, in China, for universities, they have a state-defined mission of national and social servicing. And also there is close policy synchrony between institutions and the state. And you wouldn't see this close connection between the state and the university in its mission design in in other countries, like I mean, the extent of close connectivity in China. here is the transcript of our interview to a president of a top research university in China. He said, world-class universities have grown up in the service of their own country. Only in the great process of serving the country can universities achieve first-class level. A university has always consciously integrated its own development into the ground course of national development. And this connectedness between the state and universities culminates in the policy like 985 projects, 211 projects, and the recent double first class initiatives. So if we look at this table, this graph, yes, we would say that this graph is about the policy, the major policy on Chinese higher education since 1950s. So so you would say that these higher education policies are in nature the resources distribution and reallocation among Chinese universities, and it provides an important momentum for Chinese universities to develop. And the second level is governance level. So if we look at the external governance, which mainly refers to the relationship between higher education institutions and the state. Well, China has developed a vertical duality in its governance of higher education, with strong, on the one hand, with strong top-down policy control, while on the other hand, it has a scope for decentralized local initiative. So that this is why, with this control from the state, the central control from the state, there's still some innovation and dynamics from the bottom up. Well, since the 1990s, there is a shift from state leadership and control to state facilitation and supervision. And the university leaders have gained more and more autonomy. And universities are still remain nested in government policies and the strategies. Mainly the state controls the universities mainly in the form of assigning projects, the big projects like 985 or 211, which is kind of resources distribution. And increasingly devolved autonomy has taken corporate neoliberal forms, just like many other countries. It's been associated with increased competition and private fund raising. This has potential to shape the contents of knowledge and academic work. And also, that's also some distinctiveness of the internal governance. The roles of president and the party secretary overlap closely, because there are two, we call it dual horizontal governance, internal governance. So there's a party secretary and also there's a president, and their roles sometimes overlap closely and can vary. So not all party secretaries act solely as agents of the party state, and how it is working and whether it is working well depends on a case by case. There's also integration. Integration is obtained through the formal accountability of the president to the party committee, and it secures a close working relationship between party state and university, facilitating state drivers of performance. And recently, the role of party in universities was strengthened, with the president becoming a vice party secretary. And the third level is the operation level. Here I mainly refer to curriculum, pedagogy, and the approach to research and the knowledge. Well, in China's universities, the map of disciplines is the Western map. So these disciplines have yet to become fully immersed in the living Chinese tradition. The project of uniting Western and Eastern epistemologies, although very exciting and discussed in abstract, is not happening in practice. Well, the more subtle problem is that of the orientation to knowledge, internationalization and the new liberal performance management, particularly the incentives driving publication in international journals tend to shape activity of Chinese scholars. Chinese universities favor, particularly the top research universities favor the use of international and often American theories, methods, and topics rather than Chinese ones, and weakening the classical commitment to applied and community service-based research, which is a very good tradition of Chinese scholarship culture. One of my colleagues have done a research of sociology at one university, at one Chinese university, and she found that the Chinese language work tended to be more open and more multidisciplinary and more innovative compared to the scholars' English publication. So even when the global papers discussed Chinese society tended to be interpreted via American, European lens and sensibilities in Chinese scholars' English publication. So I think this is one of the urgent problems in China for Chinese top research universities, particularly for its social sciences and humanities. And also faculty, they have agency in China, as they do in most countries, and they can draw on the deep well of scholarly tradition. So Chinese tradition emphasizes the effective freedom of the faculty, which is more like a positive freedom in the German concept. So in a system in which service to the state, because we just mentioned the tradition of Chinese scholarship to service the state. So there's no tradition of division of powers, and there's no tradition of endemic anti-statism. So the control freedom lacks the sharp resonances it has in the West. So that doesn't mean there are no issues of control freedom, but no scholar or researcher likes being told what to do. But self-censorship is no doubt more frequent than coercion. So like faculty all around the world, faculty in China learn to work around both the demands of new liberal management and also the direct pressure from the state. Okay, so I will come to the concluding remarks very quickly. So governance, I mean, based on the previous analysis from the mission level, the governance level, and also the operational level, although the operational level is the weakest part in China, we would say that governance of persons and organizations in China, combined with state-defined mission of national and social servicing, and the distinctive practices of the self, is key to what is distinctive about higher education in China. And also China is strong in mission and governance, but underdeveloped in operation. I mean curriculum, knowledge, and also the approaches to to knowledge. So if that could develop, it might be different. And also there is close nestedness in state. This will increase potency of Chinese university in action, while diminishing scope for open-ended connectedness in civil society. So this is a very important difference with American universities. And it is also challenging for China's higher education to sustain the balance of the state, market, university triangle framework. So if there's too much control, it will inhibit bottom-up initiatives. Well, if there's too much emphasis on decentralization and marketization, it will inhibit potentials for higher education to society. I mean, higher education's relevance and service to society, and enlarge the discrepancies of higher education opportunities across social classes, genders, regions, and areas. And there's also tensions in Chinese academic freedom, although less than Western observers might assume. The importance of building strong faculty agency to achieve ambitions of China's distinctive approach. So I still remember Professor Artbach wrote an article a couple of years ago saying that there's a ceiling, the glass ceiling of Chinese top research universities. Well, I am a little bit. I mean, I'm not agree with him completely on this point, because I think the glass ceiling of Chinese top universities can be overcome only if Chinese academic, I mean the agency of Chinese academic is built up. And this agency will deeply rooted in the Chinese culture. I mean, the Confucian scholarship culture, and also like the close connectedness between scholars and the state. Yes, and the final point is that knowledge, teaching, and research strongly grounded in China's scholarly tradition, so as well as international best practices. So so the humanities and the social sciences have a vital role in this point. So only if the humanities and the social sciences could be developed in China, so there will be more contribution made to the development of the state, because the state actually highly relies on the thoughts and even the critics made by social scientists and the humanities scholars. Okay, I think I have talked about 40 minutes. So that's what Li Zhou told me, that it's better for me to talk about 40 minutes, and then I will leave the rest of time to the audience. And I would be very much like to discuss with you on some points from my talk.
Okay, thank you very much for this really interesting and thoughtful presentation, looking at Chinese higher education and the relation between its own development and that from the influences from other sides, and emphasizing the strength that is focused very much on mission and governance, but weak in operations, in program pedagogy. So we are now looking for questions and answers. So the first question is from Julia. What role does Chinese growing collaboration with Western universities play in China's idea of university and achievement of ambitions?
Oh, sorry, Hans. Could you Okay, so there will be nobody. So all the questions are typed in
the chat.
in the message.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So could you? Sorry, I'm just waiting for someone. Could you repeat the question again?
What role does China's growing collaboration with Western universities play in Chinese idea of university and achievement of ambitions?
Well, in the past two decades, the Chinese university, I mean, the Chinese government actually stick to a internationalization road. So there are a lot of collaboration and exchange between China and Western American and English universities, and I think that's helpful for both parts, for both sides. So on the one hand, for a long time, Chinese researchers and scientists, we have like not only learned from those partners, but also we made some substantial contributions to those big research, scientific research projects. So I think that's helpful for both parties, and science is like borderless, and education is borderless, and it largely helps China to operate its ambition to become the top in the world class universities league table. So yeah, if I understand it correctly, yeah, your question correctly, I think that's my answer. Yeah.
But if I may, my own as a follow-up on that, do you see a shift in that? I mean, in the sense that in the past, the development of Chinese higher education was very much building on its relationship and expertise coming from the Western world, sending students and scholars to the Western world, inviting knowledge and research collaboration from the Western world, and so that helped move up the quality of higher education in China, where now you see a difference in that the Chinese universities have become much more, like you mentioned, top ranked, much more active in research and publications and in science. And so that relationship changed. There was an article in the Harvard Crimson recently about the changing relationship between Harvard and Chinese higher education, in the sense that China needed more Harvard until recently. Now Harvard needs more China. Do you see that kind of shifting, or is it? Do you still think that it is basically a mutual relationship?
Well, yes, I think that's a very sensible topic in this difficult time. But I still believe that the collaboration between Harvard and I mean the collaboration not in scientific research and also in student enrollment actually is good for both sides. I believe that Harvard needs, you know, the top Chinese students, and Harvard also needs the best scientists and researchers from China, and that's the same for China. So again, this is about, you know, the function of higher education, because there has been a debate about higher education's agency in the structure, in the economic structure, and also geopolitical structure and the political structure. So for a long time, we just see that the agency of higher education institutions is kind of, you know, confined or limited by this outside structure. So what I am thinking now is that maybe the higher education institutions, the universities, can build up its own agency and to influence the policy and to have more collaboration and exchange, because we need both. Oh, I mean, we need each other. Yeah.
Well, I would agree with that, but I should say the political factors make it much more complicated these days
Yes,
to do
yes.
that.
Mm-hmm.
In connection to that, is also you expressed a lot of emphasis on the role of social sciences and humanities, and Gerardo Blanco asks, it's very clear from the data you presented earlier that Chinese academics in science and technology have been very successful in becoming competitive in publications. But what are the barriers for Chinese scholars in social science and humanities to be also that successful? Or are you thinking that they are successful but in a different way?
Yes, yes, I do emphasize. I do think that the social sciences and the humanities had some special problem in China. I have done a research project on the social scientists' perception and their expectation towards internationalization. And most of the people we interviewed, most of the scholars we interviewed, think that the collaboration between China and the US and the UK is very necessary, and also English publication to some extent is also necessary. But the problem also exists. So on the one hand, language barrier is still one of the biggest barriers for Chinese social scientists and humanities scholars. It will influence their understanding and also their expression. And some scholars complain that when they publish in English, their thoughts, I mean, the depth of their thoughts is largely reduced if they publish in English. So, and some research has also shown that if you look at the English publication and also Chinese publication by the same scholar, by the same social scientist and the same humanities scholar, the insight, I mean, and also the depths are very different. The Chinese publication is much better than the English publication. And just a couple of months ago, the Chinese government just recently released a new policy about the evaluation, and which reduces the focus on publication in English, while emphasize the publication in Chinese. So for me, that's kind of controversial, because I'm not sure whether this orientation towards, I mean, more inward looking. That means we try to develop our own own language publication to develop our own culture. Yeah, I think the intention is good, but how to make it happen in practice, that's always very challenging, because most of us still agree that to unite in the Chinese tradition and the Western knowledge paradigm is abstract. I mean, yeah, it sounds exciting, but in practice, it's really difficult. So there's still a long way to go for Chinese social sciences and humanities.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Which, by the way, is already very difficult for continental Europeans with languages like French, German, or Dutch, whatever, in relation to English. So I can imagine that it's even more complicated in the Chinese context. Some other questions. Could you say a little bit more, few words about academic integrity? Is it a problem? Is it an issue? It's by our research fellow, Elena Denisova-Smith, who is having that as a key research topic. So she's interested to have your views on that.
Academic integrity in China.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I think yeah, when I talk about the agency of Chinese academics, I think I mean, the agency has many. The concept of agency has many connotations, and academic integrity is obviously part of it. Yeah, I don't want to judge, whether the academic integrity is, well developed in China or not. But my feeling is that, as I just said in the concluding part of my talk, I still think that that's the only way that Chinese scholars could change, the outside structure. I mean, the evaluation orientation structure, and also the political and economic structure. So yeah, I'm not sure whether I answer this question in a very specific way, but I think that's also something Chinese scholars and academics needs to work very hard on, to build up the healthy academic culture, and to change, to overcome the glass ceiling. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question is from a postgraduate student at the University of Edinburgh, who says, why does China never propose the notion of educational hubs, like you see in other parts of Asia and elsewhere in the world? Or
the concept of what? Could you say that?
Education hubs.
Education hubs. Oh, yeah. Why doesn't China? Why didn't China propose? Yeah, I think Malaysia is probably and then Singapore probably is they very propose these two concept, the concept of education hub in their policy. Well, but I remember that yeah, China does propose a similar concept in its policy 2 or 3 years ago, when the Minister of Education said we are trying to build China into the biggest hub, the biggest destination in Asia. So when we say education hub, that means it's kind of like it's like a stepstone, right? Stepstone. So we have we enroll some international students, and also the international students could go after they finish their study here, they could go to some other places. So far, I just have a feeling that Chinese higher education just want to build up itself into the destination of international students in Asia. So that's its ambition. And if we look at the data of the international students enrolled in China, we would say that most of them come from Asian countries, African countries, and B&R initiative countries. So if we look at the family background of these international students, we would say that most of them are from the middle and the lower class family background. So that means the most capable international students from those periphery countries, they are still choose US or UK as their priority of destination. So China actually it's kind of the second choice, the second priority for those international students. So in fact, we just help those students who have lower mobility capability to move, rather than the best rather than the students who have the best capability to mobilize. Yeah.
Thank you. Some 3 other questions. If you can be short and trying to focus, although that will not be easy with given the 3 questions, but given time. By Samuel Olontonwa, what is the role of Chinese academic diasporas in the plan to build internationally competitive universities? In other words, how is China mainstreaming the academic diaspora population to build the capacity of universities in China?
Could you repeat the second question?
Yeah, so how is China mainstreaming the academic diaspora population to build the capacity of the universities in China?
Ah, well, yes. Well, in the past years, there do have some talented policies to bring back, you know, those scientists and researchers in the US or UK, and just to introduce them back to work in China. But I think things will be changed after the COVID-19, because we would say that for most Western universities, they are now cut new hirings, but China, we are still, I mean, the labor market of academic still opens up to new hirings. So I think things will be changed. Things will be changed because yeah, let's see. Because I still believe that COVID-19, the pandemic outbreak, will change the pattern of the current education marketization, and also it will change the outbound student mobility from China, and also the inbound international students' mobility to China. So things will be changed. We have to. I mean, the economy of international education probably will be changed. So we have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, well, that was partly already an answer to the second question: is what is the Chinese students' response to studying at U.S. universities post COVID-19? And if I will add, you said, well, it will change, the market will change, so the outbound, but you said also something, it will change the inbound. So can you say a little bit about that as well? Both the outbound of Chinese students and the inbound of international students into China as a result of COVID-19.
Yes. Well, for the inbound international students, if we look at the data of international students in the year, I mean, the inbound international students to China in the year 2002 and 2003, when SARS outbreak, you know, outbroke in China, actually the scale, I mean, the number of international students was not affected that much. So there are some decrease in the year 2002, but it goes up quickly in the year 2003. So I believe that, you know, based on the experience of SARS in 2002, the inbound international students wouldn't, I mean, the number of inbound international students wouldn't change that much. And actually, we have more space. I mean, China has more, how to say, pull factors to attract more international students. But the pattern of origin countries, and also the pattern of the levels of inbound international students will change. So there will be a particular countries and regions of students. I mean, the number of the particular regions will increase. Yeah, in China. So that's the inbound international students, and there will also be some reduction of a particular, you know, countries influenced, impacted by the COVID-19 or the geopolitical landscape. So for the outbound international students from China, because things will also change. So I think the number will change a lot. But for the best, for the top tier students, for the top students, Chinese students, I think they will still choose the top higher education institutions in the world. So I believe that the students' numbers to for example, Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge won't change that much. But for the second and the third tier students, they will, take, more factors into consideration. For example, whether it is safe to study outside, and also whether the money is worthy, to study outside. So I believe the structure will also change, and also there will be more like second and third tier Chinese students choose to study in China rather than the Western countries.
Okay, thank you. Last question by Tessa Lakil. With much new Chinese higher education policy and funding focused on international partnerships, does it work to fulfill the social mission of the Chinese idea of the university? And is there space for addressing local needs and research in Chinese higher education?
So is this question about what do you mean by those new Chinese universities? The partnership.
The new Chinese higher education policy and how that relates to international partnerships. But how does this fulfill the social mission?
What new policy does this question refer to?
Tessa, can you explain you elaborate a little bit on your question?
Sure. I mean, when you look at some of the Belt and Road education initiatives that sort of partner with other countries, there's a lot of money that's funded by China and other countries in those initiatives. And then you mentioned how the social ideal, we miss some of that because the research focus tends to be international because of the more neoliberal corporatized styles of management and the focus on rankings and things.
Okay, so I think I understand your when you say new policy, you mean those new policy on internationalization of higher education, like B&R initiatives. So well, talking about B&R initiatives, I don't think higher education plays a vital role in the initiatives so far, from my observation. Because the plan and the strategy from the state about higher education's role in B&R initiative is still very vague, and it's not clear. And even MOE, yes, as you mentioned, the MOE invested on some of the centers in B&R countries, but that's mainly for research collaboration. That's mainly for research collaboration. And there was also some quota for the B&R country students from B&R countries to study in China. But by saying that, I still don't think there's a clear plan or strategy for China's higher education to play an important role in B&R initiatives or B&R region so far. B&R initiative is still more an economic tool rather than like culture or soft power stuff. So far, there's no sign for me to indicate that. But but in the future, I still think there are some things, there are some efforts that Chinese higher education needs to make. So number one is to have some more study on B&R countries. Yes, we do have some economic and infrastructure cooperation with those countries, but we still lack kind of research on those countries' policy, laws, and also their educational needs. So yeah, there are some more things we need to do from the China side, and also there's no sign that Chinese higher education is well accepted by those countries. Yes. So yeah, this kind of like two side needs to do more communication and more exchange to have better understanding of each other. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We could have probably several more questions, but we're already over time. So thank you for your presentation and for answering all the questions. Thanks to the participants for being engaged. And we're looking forward to having you in the fall at the center, and probably we will have then not a webinar, but a live presentation of your research and ongoing talks about the future of Chinese higher education and its international partnership. So thank you again very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
A pleasure. And thank you for Tessa and Jo in particular for helping to organize this webinar. And well, goodbye, everybody.
Yeah.